Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode of Bit Reviews. In this episode of Bit Reviews, we're going to be talking about the games Pokemon Black and White. If you don't know what Pokemon Black and White are, they are the 5th generation beginnings of the Pokemon series, and a really good game. So I want to just jump right into it. Let's go with the story. Okay, so Pokemon Black and White has one of the best stories in a Pokemon games, hands down. Yeah, it may follow the same arc of every other Pokemon game where you go out, you fight the gym leaders, you defeat the evil team, and you become champion. But it does it in a way that I think is just so much better than the other games, and I think one reason of that is just because all the characters have a good amount of depth to them that you don't really get into many other games. And almost every of these characters that you meet along the way, they feel important to the plot and aren't just there to be there. So some of them are, but it is what it is. But the game does start off like every other game. The professor asks you to help with their Pokemon research, so you do. Except this time, instead of being introduced with one rival, you're introduced with two, being Bianca and Cheren. Now, I think Bianca and Cheren are actually very underrated as rivals. Cheren is a tough competitor. He is one of the few rivals that actually utilizes held items, and he's always wanted to be better than you, but he's also not snarky about it, which is kind of nice. And he is willing to help you improve yourself as well, which is very rare in rivals, at least in Pokemon. Bianca is a different kind of rival as well. She doesn't really know what she wants to do, and she really just wants to go on this journey to kind of prove to herself and her parents that she can take care of herself, that she doesn't need her parents' support anymore to live in this world. And she admits she's not the strongest battler, and she finds that out through her journey. But in doing so, she does get heavily inspired by Professor Juniper, eventually becoming her assistant, which is a cool story for a rival, even though they have done the assistant. Actually, no, they haven't. They haven't done that yet. They don't do that really until Sword and Shield again. And unlike many rivals, they do show up really often. Like, the rivals do show up enough throughout the games, but like they are basically there every gym, like before and after. They do show up and they battle you a lot, and they kind of are feeling like they're actually traveling with you instead of you're both on completely different journeys going to different places and doing things, which is, I think, is really cool. Professor Juniper is also underrated as well. She's one of the few professors that actually show up every few times in the game. She may not be like traveling with you, but she is like keeping an eye on you, and she does make sure that you guys are still alive, which is pretty cool. You don't really see that with the other professors who kind of just send you on your way. I mean, you saw that with Professor Rowan. He would show up every once in a while, but she at least like does that as well. This also leads into the other element that I think is super important to what makes the story so good. You are almost never alone. Now, I know that other Pokemon games, like, they have you fighting the big organization with one rival, but that's just you and your rival. I feel like that's so weird to take down an entire organization, or like some random side character, and it's like, why, who are you? Like, you're just like, and they're not very important. You just kind of show up and now we're fighting alongside you. While this game, you get like more support for it, you know? The champion is not like Cynthia. Cynthia, you know, is there. She supports you, but she doesn't really fight herself. Alder at least is like, hey, you know, I'm going to try to stop them before you have to step in. But like, you may have to step in, but I'm going to at least fight them first. And I think it's awesome that the gym leaders are also willing to defend their region, which is so weird that you don't really see that with the other regions, where the gym leaders are kind of just like there, you battle them and then you never see them again, like they're unimportant. And I think that's a real shame. Like, I feel like they gave so much depth to the characters of these gym leaders, which is really cool and something you don't really get to see in these regions. But in this region, you get to see that. And I think it really makes you appreciate the gym leaders more. And I also think the whole evil plot line is great too. The fact that Ghetsis is basically running this cult to liberate Pokemon from the people and using N as his pawn to become the king and champion, and like making him think this is the way to go. And, you know, like Ghetsis has an entire actual plan behind him and is tricking N this entire time. And I feel bad for N too, because as you learn, he's like an actually good-hearted person, and he just believes that this is the best way to help protect people and Pokemon, but it's not. It just gets this getting into his head, making him think this, and at the story he does realize this. Too bad it was too late. Ghetsis is already attacking you. but you defeat Ghetsis anyways, and Ghetsis is actually arrested. I think they actually have done this a few times in the game where like, oh, we're arresting them, and then they just let them go. So I don't know what happens. Well, we find out what happens Ghetsis, but yeah, it's kind of funny that they do that as well. But yeah, it's a really good story. Like the plot line is really well written for a Pokemon game, which is rare because even though Sinnoh definitely had a lot of history, I don't think you get involved with the characters as much. You don't care about them as much as you do in Pokemon Black and White. Anyways, I think it's time to move on to the gameplay. Okay, so for the gameplay, it's a Pokemon game, so I don't really want to go too much into depth of the gameplay because I'd be surprised if you clicked on a Pokemon bit review and don't know what the gameplay of Pokemon is. But anyways, if you want a basic rundown, basic RPG, turn-based attacks, yada yada. So I'm going to try to focus on things that differ from the other Pokemon games that I really like or really didn't like. For instance, like they made the entire region force you to use new Pokemon. They did not bring back the old Pokemon for at least the main story. They are in post-game, but it's interesting that you can't get them until post-game because they never did this before. And I'm still conflicted if I like it or not. I kind of do because it forces you to use the new Pokemon and get to learn the new Pokemon better. But also for reruns, I would like to use the older Pokemon. And you do see a lot of repeats because, you know, there's just a limited amount of Pokemon available now, even though this region does introduce the most amount of Pokemon out of any region, I believe. And also, like, these Pokemon kind of feel like copycats for Gen 1. Like, for instance, with Throw and Sock, or basically just Hitmonchan, Hitmonlee. And there's multiple instances of that. Maybe I'll show up on my screen. There are some quality of life in this game, like being able to organize the bag with one click of a button and a shortcut that could be matched with multiple items and just one item in the bag, which is really nice. It definitely has my favorite item finder in the bag. It doesn't force you to have to constantly interact with it. It just kind of automatically tells you where it is and makes finding hidden items much nicer and easier, which is something I'm glad they had in Gen 6 as well. They introduced seasons in this gen, and this is the only reason with seasons. I understand why they don't have them later games, but I wish they kind of were in the later in the games. The only thing I don't like about the seasons is it forces you to play in different months, and you have to wait a month before you can get certain items and other things, which is annoying because, I mean, it's nice that they're trying to encourage you to play later on, but also having to wait for a different season is just annoying because what if you need that item and now you have to wait until next season before you can go get it? I never really got to use the dream feature, which I really wish I did because it looks so cool, and I think I never actually seen gameplay of it. I know it exists, but I never sadly got to use it, and I really wish I did. The introduction of triple and rotation battles I think are super fun to have in a Pokemon game, and I really wish they were in the future games because it's a new style of battling, and any kind of thing that like makes battling different is fun, even though they were kind of harder than most games or the most battles. I wish they were, and I don't think they were competitive in any way. I don't think there was competitive triple and rotation battles, which would be fun if they like continued on in the future and they actually did get in format for it. But it's just sad that they no longer continue in the future, which I understand because of hardware issues, but I don't know. I wish they were more. The introduction of permanent TMs is also a great thing as well. I really like that they added them, just not having to buy in bulk and just having it one that you just continuously use forever is always just a nicer thing to have. And I also think the battles are just some of the best looking battles in any Pokemon game. Like just the sprite work, the animations, they're just so nice in this game. And I really wish they translated better to 3D. I really do. I gotta stop comparing these to the future games, but I love these games a lot. So overall, I think that Pokemon Black and White have some of the best gameplay in any Pokemon game. Though I do wish there were more things to explore and things that did have exploration weren't so bland. Like they do have complete areas that just feel there to be there, but when you go through them, like there's nothing really important to go through, and it's just, I wish there was more in that aspect of the exploration. But besides that, the rest of the game is super fun. Going through the story is super fun, and it does have a decent post game as well, which is pretty cool. Okay, so I think Pokemon Black and White are definitely some of the best Pokemon has ever been. Not the best. That is another series of games that I'm going to talk about in the future. But for what it is such a great game for Pokemon standards. It has an amazing story, has such a qualities to the atmosphere that we don't really get to see in others, sadly. I also think it took too long for the Pokemon game to truly appreciate this game, and sadly because of that, it is one of the worst selling games. But I'm glad that they're finally getting the recognition they deserve. So with that, I'm giving Black and White a 7.6 out of 8. And yeah, with that being said, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully I'll see you guys in the next bit reviews.